Hey y'all, Melissa here with you today, and today's project is how to sew patch pockets. Now these are a type of pockets that you can add on to any kind of pattern because they're just top stitched on right on top of the garment. And they're called patch pockets because the first ones were basically patches of fabric sewn on. You can also shape them, you can round off corners, you can make cute little heart shapes, you can do more like a jeans style pocket with the corners cut off. There are lots of possibilities, and today I'm going to show you how to draft your own pattern and then sew these on. The pocket pattern that I have sewn here is on my spearmint set, and that pattern piece is included with the pattern, but I can show you how to draft your own. First, you're going to want to know what's the finished measurement that you want. So on this particular pattern, the finished pocket measures 5.5 by 5.5. It is a square. So I'm going to draw that out on my paper here. And I've got a link to the clear ruler that I am using below, if you happen to want the same one. Okay, here is what I want my finished pocket to be like. Now, I need to add to the sides and the bottom a seam allowance. I like to do a 1/2 inch seam allowance, so I'm going to add that. And then on the top, I need to decide how much of a hem I want to add. On this particular one, I've added an inch hem, and then I also add a 1/4 inch to turn under that raw edge right inside the top here. So I need to add 1 1/4 inches total for this hem. And then this is going to be my pocket pattern that I will cut out. Once you've cut it out, here's my pattern piece, and I want to add interfacing. This interfacing is the same depth as the hem that I added to the top. So I'm going to get my ironing board set up, and I want to fuse this on here. All right, I'm going to apply this fusible interfacing by just pressing my iron straight down and back up, and then I want to press this whole hem right sides together, and I'm lining up these raw edges on the sides here, and I want to double check to make sure that I'm doing this straight. So this is just a piece of cardstock that I have measured and drawn lines on, and I can put it inside like this and make sure that I am lined up to that 1 1/4 inch line, and then press. And then I want to flip it around, and this raw edge, I want to do a 1/4 inch to the wrong side. So I'm going to use my pressing guide again. And now I'm ready to take this over to the machine. Now, what I'm going to do with this at the machine is I want to sew with a 1/2 inch seam allowance from the side edge, and I want to stitch between the folds, so from the edge to this folded edge. On this end, no matter which direction I'm going, on this end I want to make sure that I back stitch to help reinforce this. So here is what this looks like once I've stitched those two little edges, and now I am going to be pressing in all of these side edges after I turn this. So I like to use this tool. This is called a point turner tool, and I've got it linked below, and turn these top hem corners out. And I can use the flat side of it to really kind of push that corner out, and do the same thing on the other edge. Then I'm going back to my little cardstock pressing tool, and I want to make sure that I am pressing a 1/2 inch to the wrong side here. And that should line up pretty precisely with the stitching that I did. I'll do this on the other side as well. And then on the bottom, I want to also fold up that 1/2 inch. Make sure when you turn it over that you don't have little corners peeking out. If you do, you're going to want to cheat them in a little bit, repress, and press again to make sure those corners are nice and clean and that you don't have fabric sticking out beyond the edge of the pocket. I also like to give it one more press on the right side just to double check how everything looks. And then I'm going to take this over to the machine and I'm going to stitch the hem so that this no longer flips out. Now you can do this two ways. If you trust that you have been really precise on folding that hem down, you can sew it from the right side. But I prefer to make sure I'm really getting close to that edge by sewing from the wrong side. If you do that, make sure that the bobbin thread you are using will coordinate with the outside of your pocket, because the bobbin thread is what will show here. I also like to move my needle position over so that it's stitching right on that edge. Once you have the top of that pocket hemmed, then it is time to place it on your garment to sew it on. Now, this particular pair of shorts here, I actually used a triple stitch on my machine, and that's why this top stitching stands out quite a bit more than the single thread hem that I did on the sample here. And I also went ahead and I basted up the side seams of my shorts and pulled them on my body and then played pin the pocket on my rear. It can be helpful because the pattern guidelines, markings of where to put a pocket are just a suggestion. Everybody's body differs, and the most flattering place and angle at which to put your pockets may vary on your own body. So these are actually not placed exactly as the pattern suggested. I moved them a little closer to the center back seam for myself personally, and I angled them slightly more than was suggested. I put this outer angle a little bit higher. And really, things like a quarter of an inch, a half an inch in these areas can make a lot of difference to how the final garment looks. So I really do think it's worth basting up the side seams, basting on a waistband if you want, or just tying the top on with elastic, and then pinning the pockets actually on your body to check the placement. Then I like to use that same clear ruler that I was using for drafting to kind of make sure that I've got my pockets symmetrical. So I measure from the seam, the center back seam, and I measure down from the waistband seam to make sure that these were in the same place on each side of my shorts. Once you figure out the placement, let me show you how the patch pocket gets stitched on. So let's pretend these are the back of my shorts, and I'm going to place my pocket on and then pin it into place. I like to pin at a 45-degree angle at the corners because it helps me know when my needle gets close to that pin, that's when I need to stop and turn to go down the next edge. When you're sewing on a patch pocket, you need to reinforce the upper corners, otherwise they'll just pull off eventually. So there are a few ways you can do that. On this particular pair, you can see that I just reinforced them with some back stitching beyond the edge of the pocket. And that was easy to do because I was using this triple stitch top stitching. So that's one method you can do, and I'm not going to show you that one. I'm actually going to show you two others. One is to sew a box around and then continue stitching on. You see this often on jeans, that they'll have like a box sewn in the corners that helps reinforce that corner. The other one is one that I informally call a chicken foot, and it is when you stitch down and then you stitch out at an angle and back stitch back to that straight line. So kind of looks like that, like a chicken foot. I'm going to show you both of them on the machine. All right, I have changed thread colors here so that hopefully you can more easily see what I'm doing. And we are going to start with the one I call a chicken foot. So what you do is you're going to start off the edge of the pocket. You might want to use that self-leveling foot if you have it. And I'm going to stitch down to this pin here, which is where I want to angle back and make my chicken foot. And then I'm going to angle the fabric slightly and I'm going to stitch backwards until I get off the edge again. And then forwards to that same point, and then turn, and I'm going to continue down. And on this end, I'm going to sew the little square to reinforce. So I'm going to go all the way up to the top corner, turn, turn, I'm going to back stitch right at the end. So here is what those pockets look like. I'm going to trim off some threads on the front, and you'll also want to trim threads on the back. And then you can see the two different ways of reinforcing the foot, to sew a square like that or to do a little chicken foot like I did there. If you want another method to sew on a pocket, I also have a tutorial for side seam pockets, which get hidden in the side seams of a garment, and I've gone ahead and linked that here and you can check that out.